Welcome everybody to The Thoughtful Bro. We are back with a very special episode this week. We're going to do something a little bit different and talk about that ever fascinating, totally awesome topic for all of us Americans, which is Navy SEALs. What is a Navy SEAL? What makes a Navy SEAL? And how can we all as people bring a little bit of that Navy SEAL into our daily lives? We have an actual Navy SEAL commander, Mike Hayes, on the show today. We're going to get to him in just a second, but just a few words to kick us off. As you know, we're here every Tuesday on A Thoughtful Bro talking about what makes great books tick, what makes great authors tick. We're here sort of for the story behind the story. As for those of you who might be new, tuning in this time for the first time to A Mighty Blaze, we're an all-volunteer organization that started at the beginning of COVID. The aim is to connect readers and writers who have been separated from each other because of the pandemic, but in this new world we're living in, virtual is what it's all about. So if you want to check out our videos, there's scores and scores of videos with just amazing authors, from newfound debut authors to real kind of literary legends like John Irving and Judy Blume and on and on. Just go to our library on A Mighty Blaze on Facebook. We're not asking for your money. All we're asking is that if you want to spend a little money, spend it on amazing books like Never Enough, written by Mike Hayes, or just support any of our authors who are just trying to make ends meet like everybody else here in a time of COVID. A few other things. If you want to ask a question, as usual, please just pop it in the chat. It'll make its way to me. I also wanted to mention, please just take a moment to subscribe, like us on our socials. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You can also go on our amightyblaze.com website and sign up for our newsletter to just kind of hear about all the interviews we do every week. Live interviews just like this, where people can show up and ask questions. A tease for next week, I'm going to be on with debut author Julie Carrick Dalton, who's written this book that's getting this incredible buzz. The book has really taken off. It's called Waiting for the Night Song. It's sort of like a kind of literary mystery wrapped in a climate thriller. So it's, and she is actually a farmer based in, I think, New Hampshire, Vermont. But she's got a lot of really cool things to say about the environment and climate, all wrapped up in this really cool mystery. So check out that book. It is like super taking off right now. But that's all I got for you for the intro. I want to talk about Mike Hayes. I'm going to jump right into this. Mike Hayes has been held at gunpoint and threatened with execution. He's jumped out of a building rigged to explode, and he's helped amputate a teammate's leg. He's run meetings in the White House Situation Room, worked on international arms treaties, and negotiated with the Taliban. Do I have you hooked yet? Mike Hayes, he is a former commanding officer of SEAL Team 2. He led a 2,000-person special ops team in southern Afghanistan. He's worked directly with Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama. His military decorations include the Bronze Star for Valor in Combat in Iraq, and the Defense Superior Service Medal from the White House. And wait, I missed one. Also a Bronze Star in Afghanistan. He's a lifetime member of the Council on Foreign Relations and is currently Chief Digital Transformation Officer of VMware. We're going to get into this in a moment, but he's a graduate of Holy Cross College in Worcester, Mass., which is where my father was a professor for 40 years. And he lives in Connecticut with his family. The praise for Never Enough has been amazing. Mike and I were just talking before the show about how the book is just shooting up the bestseller list. It is climbing in a lot of different categories about team building, about military, and just kind of general great books. But Admiral William McCraven, former commander of U.S. Special Ops, had this to say: "I've known Mike for over 2 decades and seen his incredible leadership and dedication to the SEALs, our military, and our nation. Mike's experiences and wisdom make Never Enough a valuable read, and I strongly recommend to anyone, it to anyone looking to lead a more extraordinary life." The CEO of Warby Parker, Steve Case, the founder of AOL, all had great things to say about the book. Steve Case said, "This is essential reading for anyone looking to reach the next level." And frankly, I know the viewers of The Thoughtful Bro are looking to reach the next level. So Mike, first I want to say thank you for your service, and also welcome to The Thoughtful Bro.
Well, Mark, first of all, thanks for having me. And thanks for the entire Mighty Blaze ecosystem that you and others have spearheaded and brought together, because it's things like this through COVID that have really helped keep the world together. So first, my and on behalf of everybody, our sincere appreciation to you and those who volunteer and make this work. So that's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a crazy ride, and we've got such a response from readers out there. So thank you to all in the audience for supporting our authors too. All right, so this interview, we got about 40 minutes here. We're going to divide it into two parts, just so people know. The first is going to be about what it means and what it's like to be a Navy SEAL. Clearly, Mike's going to have a lot to say about that. But then about halfway through, we're going to transition into kind of like how can you apply what it takes to be a Navy SEAL into a civilian life, like frankly most of us lead, who are not in the military and who are just trying to like lead a more fulfilling, more excellent, more meaningful life. So that's how we're going to divide it up, and we'll do some questions at the end. But Mike, maybe let's just like first, just to give us an overview, tell us why you wrote this book, and just give me like that kind of elevator pitch idea of what the book's about.
Yeah, first, Mark, thanks so much. The reason I wrote Never Enough was because I have had such a unique set of experiences, and I'm now just really passionate about sharing. The thing that drives me is helping have impact in the world. And like when I applied for the White House Fellowship, there's a really hard essay. We all know on this in this video that it's a lot harder to write a 200-word essay than to write 500 or 1,000 or 10 pages, right? And I remember distilling down some really tight language that said, hey, I don't just want to have a positive impact on people. I want to positively impact people to have a positive impact on others. And then you get that nonlinear effect on the world. So really, I was trying to share. Some people say, well, gosh, never enough. Isn't that kind of like the traditional, like the drill sergeant, just go be faster, be better. And it's intentionally provocative because the title really, Mark, is about meaning and impact. How do we consistently have more meaning and impact, in which is really about friends, it's about teammates. So I intentionally try to thread across a bunch of different situations. So this can be a leadership book, this can be memoir, this can be motivation and inspiration, this can be business, this can be for any level of where people are in a corporate hierarchy, this can be for people who aren't in a corporate hierarchy. Because what I've really tried to do throughout my time in the SEALs and in now 10 years in the private sector is to like abstract out what I've learned, because it's very important. Like, people aren't all going to be SEALs or go work in the White House or be in an elevated position in some private sector company. So how do you translate that for people? And that's what I've worked really hard to do.
Absolutely. Well, I think you succeeded. I read the book. I thought it was terrific. It totally both kind of scratched that itch of curiosity that I think so many of us feel about the kind of incredible life that SEALs live. But then also I sort of got to a few things here and there where I'm like, man, I'm going to use that in my life. And in fact, I'll share an anecdote of how I used one of the principles in your book this weekend on a basketball court when I was a coach of my child's team. So look, Mike, let's rewind it a little bit. You come from a military family, and your father was at your grandfather was at Pearl Harbor. Can you just like tell that story? Because I just thought that Pearl Harbor story was remarkable.
Absolutely. I'd love to. And first of all, my grandfather was definitely one of my heroes. He's just an incredible human being. He passed away at age 90 back in 2009. But my grandfather had such a life of service and trying to have impact and meaning for others and he also never told me what to do growing up, nor did my father or anybody. They just, like most great parents, it's how do you just build that foundation and then just find the ways that people can flourish and thrive. For my grandfather, one of the stories he told me much later in his life was that on that morning of infamy, December 7th, 41, he woke up like any good Irish Catholic, family he was hungover. It was a night out, a Saturday night. He was out with his, 6 other buddies. They were all just about a year out of school. He was class of 1940 from the U.S. Naval Academy. And what he said though was when he heard the first wave hitting, he knew that he needed to get back to his battle station. He tried to rouse his 6 buddies. None of those guys would go with him. He jumped in a Jeep. And he told me the hardest part of Pearl Harbor was actually driving the Jeep past the Marine gate guard at 40 miles an hour, worried that Marine was going to shoot him. But he made it back to his ship, and he was on his ship for the 3rd wave. And then just, just went through a lot, just like everybody that did that day. And like a lot of service members today have. But then he decided that after being bombed, he said, he pointed to the sky and said, I'm going to go be up there. And he went through flight school and then later commanded bombers in the Aleutian Islands for a year later in the rest of the war.
Now, and just one further detail, this ship that he was on sank or partly sank, right?
It did. The USS Maryland, and my family got our first chance a couple years ago before COVID to go visit Pearl Harbor. It was our first experience going back there, and my, how harrowing it is to still see today, this day, the Arizona leaking oil from the from its being sunk in quick math 80 years ago. Your dad's the math professor. I don't want to disappoint him here, yeah, it was halfway sunk, and they needed to ultimately pump it back out, and they towed it back to Bremerton, Washington, and my grandfather was on board for that tow.
What a story. What an inspiration as well. Okay, so flashing forward now, you're at Holy Cross College. It's a university. I grew up there, kind of right near there. My father was a teacher there for 40 years. It turns out, full disclosure, Mike's father and my father both graduated from Holy Cross the same year. So there's like a family connection that we didn't put together until about yesterday. But anyway, a lot of Holy Cross between the two of us. Now you were there, and it's kind of what struck me about your kind of sense of vocation about the SEALs was that it was sort of, there's a Venn diagram overlap between the kind of Jesuit mission and the mission of service at Holy Cross, and then the SEALs culture. Is that right? And can you just kind of explain how those two line up for you?
Absolutely. I think part of the goal of Never Enough is also to help people think about this exact same concept that I'll talk about. It is about service to others. It's how do we make ourselves better, which is constantly leaning into the hard things, whether it's the hard class at Holy Cross, or it's going to SEAL training, or it's for all of us who are on this live stream right now. It's the things that apply in your life where you're like, do I take path A or path B? And I think that, I wrote in the book, failure is only failure if you fail and don't learn. If you fail and learn, that's success, because it feeds back into that feedback loop. And then you constantly, improve. And then the better our foundation is, the more that we can give back to others in our own lives. We all have different gifts and different abilities and different skills. Sure, I served as a SEAL. That some people hold that up as like really awesome. It is awesome. But at the same time, there's a million things on this planet that are awesome. We've got all different educators, healthcare workers, you name it. There are people who are trying to make their families, their towns, their counties, their states, their country better, the globe better, the environment better. Those are all awesome. And that's part of the mission of this thing, is to get people, off the sidelines to say, how can I lean in and just a little bit more and hopefully inspire. But the thing that you're hitting on, Mark, really the Venn diagram, it's really service and orienting more for others than self.
Yeah. Great. And there's a great quote in the book. I'm just going to do my best to quote it, but you talk a lot about leading a meaningful life and how important it is to lead a meaningful life. And you say that, there's a lot of dark days as a SEAL, and you go through all these scenarios, and not only like days of enormous physical strain, hardship, stress, but also days of great grief and tragedy when, folks, die in combat and so on. And you say in the book, you've got to know what that thing is that gets you up and gets your feet moving to put one foot in front of the other on those really hard days. And so I'll just put you on the spot right now. Can you just articulate that for me? What, for you, Mike Hayes, what is that thing?
Well, it's a great question, Mark, and thanks for asking it. You might be able to see, for those who are seeing on video, there's two flags over my shoulder. And, I, like almost every SEAL of my era, have buried dozens of friends, some of them whom I know just as well as I know my brother. There have been really hard days. And so for me, that's one of the things that I try to do now, is not get bogged down by that, but to try to continue to celebrate their life and to try to help make the lives of those who they've left behind, the widows, the children, the parents, et cetera, even incrementally better. You can never take all that pain away, but how do we properly and most appropriately thank those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice? And look, it is really hard. Being a SEAL can sound, sexy and cool and all that stuff, but let me tell you, there are days that are as hard as they get from an emotional standpoint. I've just been I've been in situations that are as hard as you get, and some of those at Arlington Cemetery, some of those overseas, some of those, when a mission goes sideways and somebody gets medevaced out and ends up being flown home. It's or even worse, you're putting caskets on a plane, man. It sucks.
Yeah. Well, for me, there's nothing that sounds easy about being a SEAL. I mean, like, I love being competitive and I love getting after it, but I mean, SEAL is a different level. So let's just segue with that into, I think I'm going to ask a few questions here that are sort of like kind of odd, again, like these kind of, there's a mystique around the SEALs, and I just feel like I want to try to dig into it a little bit. So one of the things is that SEAL training is notoriously hellish. And there's this great, one of the anecdotes I love so much in the book is you tell the story of like, you had to, they made you sprint for like 10 minutes as fast as you can, right? Like sprint so fast, you feel like you're going to die. And then you get to the end and they like berate you and like, you idiots, like that was nothing. Do it again. So then you do it again. And some of the guys somehow run faster than before. And then those guys get singled out. It's like, see, you weren't running as hard as you could have. I mean, this is unbelievable. So I want to segue into a question just like, can you characterize this SEAL training for us, you know, with that anecdote or any other anecdotes?
Yeah,
like,
Mark, I'm so glad you brought that one up because it is a perfect anecdote. What they actually did was the same thing that my mom did when I was in third grade and I'd come home from homework at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She'd say, Michael, do you have a lot of homework? And if it was yes, I better get started. If it was no, it'll only take me a couple minutes to do before I go outside and play. So no matter what, I was doing my damn homework. Right. But no, that 2 mile timed run that you just talked about is so metaphorical for just everything, not just SEALs, but for life, right? Because it's when you get told after you run as hard as you humanly can in pants and boots, soft sand, just like as miserable as a human can be, you finish and then you get instructors telling you have to do it again. What's your spirit like when in those moments when you've just given it everything you have and you have to go do more? That's one of the lessons right there. And so and that's where like, well, the kind of person who makes it through training, my class had 19 graduates from a class of 120. Those are the people who in those moments are like, okay, this sucks, but let's get going. Let's roll, let's rock it, you know, and don't get down and get demoralized. But that comes with training and it's, everybody can change that mentality. I deeply believe that. And then for the other half of the group that didn't run as fast, they got told, hey, you know, if you're serious about being a SEAL, you always have to be able to dig in deeper into those reserves and beat your first time. So just like my mom's homework, it was the same thing after that race. No matter what, you weren't good enough, and they try to get into your head. But the thing is, the goal, the exercise and the goal there, what they're really teaching you, what is how to be resilient, how to not get broken, and how to keep that positive spirit.
And all right, and I want to push a little bit further on the training because I just happened to have watched the Tiger Woods documentary over the weekend, and like, so he did some training with SEALs, and they talk about this one drill. I just have to ask you that because I was fascinated by it. This drill where like they put it like a sack or something over your head, and then they take it off, and there's like some situation that you have to deal with. Like who knows what it is, but it's like different every time. Is that did you do that drill? And like, what is the purpose of that drill?
Well, yes, to answer your question. It's also not a drill that we do in our original like 6 month of SEAL training to qualify whether you're a SEAL or not. The funny thing is after you do 6 months of SEAL training and there's only the 19 graduates, that's just the beginning. Now, the good thing is that we know foundationally and fundamentally that anybody who passes through that eye of the needle, they have physically and mentally what it takes to be in the SEAL teams. Then it's all about how do you get better. And so the exercise that you're talking about is really testing reactions. You know, how do you very quickly discern, you know, a situation where you need to step in? The whole role of the military is to not be needed, right? It's not force. The role of the military is force if and when necessary, and when necessary, win. But it starts with the question of should and if.
Right. And I would just say, like, for those who are kind of wondering, like some of the anecdotes in Mike's book, there are far more anecdotes of Mike in a very dangerous situation, sort of like approaching a situation that could turn very violent and deadly. But then Mike sort of like just evaluating, and finding, like realizing very often that like the use of force is not the right choice, and kind of different ways to just approach the situation and de-escalate them. There's like, this book is about like kind of masterful de-escalation as much as force, wouldn't you say?
I would, because Mark, the thing, like whether you're in a business or you're a SEAL or everything, you start with the outcome that you're trying to achieve, which I like to say that's just like the vision. Where are you going? Then there's the strategy, which is the how. How are you going to get there? And all my job is as the commanding officer of a SEAL team is to make sure I've got a bunch of people who can think creatively and think of a bunch of different hows. And then we risk adjust those paths. What are all the different little small things we can do that will help us only assume risk that is worth assuming, and to take that minimal risk in order to achieve the desired outcome? Then you get into the execution phase of like, go do the thing that you've just planned. So what SEALs really become experts at is that front end of how I joke around, the L in SEAL stands for lazy. But the thing is, the L, there's a lot of truth to it, because why do you want to spend any extra energy to achieve your outcome that you're trying to achieve?
Yep, absolutely. And we're going to get into a very, one of the most dangerous situations Mike has ever been in, where his life was threatened in a moment. But before I move on from SEAL training, there were, I think, 120 people who started in your SEAL class, and I think only 19 actually graduated. And, you know, we're going to talk maybe a little bit later in the conversation about grit and things like that. But I mean, this is sort of a great time to bring that up. I guess, again, I'm asking you to boil something very complicated and nuanced down to like almost a soundbite. But if you could just like look honestly within yourself and say, what was that quality that led you to be one of the 19 I mean, already just to be one of the 120 is extremely selective. And then, you know, those guys are like the amazing, dedicated, you know, athletic guys, and they even can't quite cut it. And you have this great quote in the book. You say, so two quotes about this. One is your friend is Representative Dan Crenshaw. He's a U.S. congressman. He said, I heard him say in an interview, unless you wanted to be a SEAL for your entire life, you're not going to make it. And then you said, when you ask somebody in training if what are the chances they think they're going to make it, and they say 99%, you say, I'm 100% sure you're not going to make it, because you have to feel 100% confident. Anyway, all of which is to say, it's an enormously difficult thing to do. And can you boil it down? What are your qualities that put you through?
Great tee up. The 99% thing is really the essence of it. If just to restate, if you're 99% sure you're going to make it through SEAL training, I'm 100% sure you won't. And so that mentality is like, I'm all in. I'm in. Go try the really hard thing, and you are going to give everything you have and then more. This sounds very cliche, but cliches are cliche for a reason, right? And so this is the heart of it is determination, heart, passion. You have to be passionate about what you're doing. And a little bit of the X factor is teammates. You know, people, I could tell stories about things that happened overseas where SEALs did incredibly heroic things that could be held up as, you know, the American flag or democracy or, you know, motherhood or apple pie. But the truth is, those are all incredibly important. But the reason people do really hard things is for the love of their teammate next to them and not wanting to let people down. When you have a real team, real teams know that they will equally share the credit or the blame, you know, the success or the failure. And as soon as there's the perception that credit or blame will be disproportionately shared, that's where teams start breaking down. And so for us, you know, Mark, it's really in that very beginning of SEAL training. How do you think about, you know, the boat crew? That's a 7-person unit that in SEAL training that comes together, and it's just you and your boat. You run everywhere with that thing on your head, or you're paddling it out in the ocean, or you're running the whole week. In Hell Week, you're up from Sunday morning until Friday afternoon. And I very vividly remember carrying that thing on my head, and one day thinking, the more I hurt, the less my teammates have to hurt. And when everybody tries to do more than their share, it's a really beautiful thing. It's just not unlike, to make it more of a business standpoint. I've done a lot of complicated deals, multi-million-dollar deals. And whenever two parties come together and are ready to reach more than halfway across the table, it's easy to find an intersection. Yeah. Right. And so when you come to a table and you're like, I'm only going to reach 45% across the table, like, you're not going to find that middle ground. And so that's really the essence of it is, do you have the flexibility and some of the agility that I talk about in the middle third of the book to really ultimately drive those great outcomes that we all want for each other and for the nation and the world?
Oh, I wish like one of our branches of government could behave more like a SEAL team, you know, just all in this together. Anyway, all right, I want to segue into a very, very exciting story. I'm going to tee it up for you. And so basically, Mike at one point was in Peru, and he was held at gunpoint in the back of a car. He was carjacked, and the guy was asking you some very tough questions, like, how do you like being tortured? And you had a loaded gun pointed at your head for some time. I guess, like, I mean, feel free to add anything to that story that you'd like. But my question that I actually want to ask you is, Explain to me the difference between how a normal human being who has not been trained, even perhaps yourself, say at the age of 17 before you entered your training and everything, but how an untrained person reacts to a situation like that, and then tell me the SEAL version of what it's like to have a gun pointed at your head.
Yeah, it starts with thinking about like what, again, to use the framework before, what do you want out of that situation? The outcome is to live. You know, the truth is that can sound very mission oriented. It was a very uneventful evening. Myself and another guy, Ken, we were left behind. This is before the days of cell phones. We were in Lima, Peru, while our other 5 guys flew down to Iquitos in the middle of the Amazon, and we were just eating dinner. We got pulled over by guys dressed like cops, and we thought, okay, they must have us confused for somebody. And then all of a sudden, finger on the trigger, weapon off safe, they're jamming me in the head with the muzzle. And then we got driven around and asked a million different questions. It turns out that we were training the Peruvian SEALs who had captured a guy named Guzman, who is the leader of Sendero Luminoso, which is the Shining Path, which was their, a very serious terrorist organization back in those days. This is roughly this was 96. And so being in that car with my swim buddy, Ken Needham. Swim buddy's a kind of a term that a broad term. We weren't swimming in the back of the car, but that same concept that you get from SEAL training, never leave your buddy. And I remember very vividly thinking, I could jump out of this car. We were going 30, 40, maybe miles an hour. I'd live, but they'd probably shoot Ken. And I just very vividly remember thinking, I cannot possibly jump out of this vehicle and live with myself knowing that I bailed on Ken and then they kill him. And so like at age, whatever it was, 24-ish, 25 something, I was able to know that in the most adverse of circumstances, I'm not going to leave my buddy. Now, some people might call that dumb, but I certainly appreciated that, the opportunity, and look at the bright, what you learn from it, what would you do again, what would you do differently, and do the thinking around that. So you really learn character in those hardest of situations.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We have a bunch of questions rolling in, so we are going to get to those. Don't worry, folks. I need like 10, 15 minutes to get through some questions. Another question, this falls in the category of like things I always wanted to ask a SEAL, but never had the chance. So I would say that the raid that got Osama bin Laden, to me, in like my lifetime, is like the most unambiguously heroic kind of military operation of my lifetime. That's how it felt to me. It felt high stakes. It felt like it was done with absolute precision. It was totally improbable. It was just one of the most exciting and proud moments I had. And also I was like, this is a separate story, but I was at 9/11. I was at the Twin Towers that day. So it meant something personal to me to see that happen. So, and I have like often thought to myself, God, if I could like choose to be any place, anytime in history, I might have chosen to be like on the helicopter flying in for that raid. I mean, to be among that group of people, knowing what they were about to do, and then to do it and get out of there the way they did, it's just incredible. My question to you is this, Mike. When you woke up that morning and heard that news, however that news made its way to you, which might be different than how it made its way to me, but however you found out, I'm just wondering, like, take yourself back and like, give me like what reaction you had. Did you just think like, yep, another day for the SEALs? Or like, were you particularly proud as well? Or I just want to hear what you thought.
Dude, Mark, I was so freaking proud. And here's why, for so many different reasons. And first of all, thanks. And I didn't realize your connection with 9/11 and being there. So, you've also, like everybody who's either seeing or hearing this, we all have hard days in different ways. And so how do we end up helping each other on hard days is a really important question. But the answer to your question really has to do with pride in teammates. I grew up with the guy who led that operation is a friend of mine. I have a million bajillion % respect for the guy and admiration. He's a hero. He takes risk. He's a great leader. The guys who were on that operation, I knew a real large number of those guys quite well. These are all guys basically my age that we grew up together for a decade and a half, 2 decades. And so just immense pride. And at the same time, Mark, I think the thing that if you ask the same question to my friend who led that, his answer would be very deflective. He would say, hey, you know, sure, we did that part of it, but let's talk about the people who were back and got the intelligence for that.
Yeah.
Let's the people that flew the helicopters. Let's talk about the people that did the purchasing for our uniforms, who worked the radios, who, you know, and just every process, the intelligence, like the whole thing. And so it's just really, truly a team effort. The SEALs, sure, we end up getting credit for that last 5 yards in the red zone or whatever. But the truth is you don't get to the 5-yard line without an incredible team that is much broader than SEALs. And that's something that I learned early on, and most successful SEALs learn early on. When you're one of those 19 graduates and you finish SEAL training, you're like, you think you're pretty cool. And you can make a real mistake and think that you're cooler than anybody else in the world. And the faster that you learn that is not true, that you're just part of a team that's in the broadest sense of the word, and that everybody's got different gifts and skills and abilities, that's when you end up really collectively doing the most good. So anyways, long answer. Short answer is just pride and excitement for our nation and those guys.
Yeah. And I mean, I frankly can't help but feeling that like there's probably like once a week something equally as, you know, important and equally as dangerous that the SEALs are doing, but we never hear about it, right?
Every one of those guys who was on that mission will tell you that they've been on that mission was hard by all standards. It was a hard mission. Please don't mishear me. It was, you know, just miraculous and hard. Every single one of those guys will also tell you that they've been on harder missions. Just nobody hears about it.
Right. Okay. All right. So I want to transition just briefly for another few minutes into kind of like how we transition out of SEAL mode and into civilian mode, how we take knowledge that you've earned and put it into our lives. And so first, I just want to like take a moment to ask you the question just about the fascination with SEALs. You know, I think my conclusion is that it was after the Osama bin Laden raid that, you know, SEAL Team 6 and SEALs in particular started to become elevated kind of in our cultural consciousness. You had movies like Zero Dark 30, Captain Phillips, American Sniper, and so on. There's big audiences around those. But, you know, one of the questions I got from a gentleman named Brendan Murphy that came in was, you know, how come there's so much talk about SEALs, but people don't talk as much about Delta Force, say, or, you know, other kind of special ops groups within the U.S. military. I guess the general question here is just talk about, how do you feel about like the mystique around SEALs?
Great question. And I'm going to call you Murph because I figure your friends probably do too.
But for sure.
Look, there are a bunch of different elements and units and that do so many different things that are absolutely awesome in so many different ways. SEALs do not have the corner market as the only organization that's awesome. So let me start there. Look, I was in the Obama White House for his first foreign policy showdown, which turned into the movie Captain Phillips. I ran that operation. In fact, upstairs, in my safe, I've got a little handwritten note that says, Mike, thanks you did a great job on the Somalia mission. You made a family very happy at Easter, Barack. Like that's literally upstairs on White House stationery. And so that right away was like elevated the visibility for SEALs. And so, you know, I was just the guy in the White House Situation Room. And now that could be a whole fun hour and talk about that in and of itself. But all I did was call and coordinate with friends of mine who were at the SEAL team in order to go over and do that mission. And my great friends led that in incredible performance, but nonetheless, it elevated the picture of the SEALs in the policymaker and in the new administration's eyes. So naturally, when you get a call and things go well, you get more calls. And so that there just was a little short cycle there where we got a lot of calls. But you know what? At the same time, I don't know Delta Force incredibly well, but the one thing that I'm absolutely certain of is that they were doing absolutely badass things, equal, better, you know, everybody has a role, and there's really a lot of awesome organizations out there. So the short answer is I would, just like any SEAL, deflect credit and share the pride.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So just kind of pivoting on that about the mystique around SEALs. I mean, I've kind of worked in the private sector my whole life. I've worked for big companies, and I know there is a fascination with SEALs and a desire to be close to SEALs, to bring SEAls in. You've had an amazingly successful career after you left the military. You've worked for a bunch of great companies in high level roles. And I guess I just like, what do you think it is about the business community that like just wants some of that SEALs mojo. You know what I mean? And to bring them in as a public speaker, bring them in as they bring in you as somebody who actually works for the company. What is it about corporate America that wants that?
Well, I think, Mark, the question's a little more nuanced than you're painting it, to be candid. And so it's not that easy to transition out of the SEALs. You know, I know a lot, whether it's the SEALs or other parts of the Department of Defense. It's hard to translate the mojo you're talking about into a role in corporate America that maps to business leader, chief operating officer, chief strategy officer, chief marketing officer. You know, like to see that path is really hard for people. I've been tremendously fortunate, got to go straight to Bridgewater, the world's largest hedge fund, was chief of staff to a guy, Ray Dalio, and then worked with Dave McCormick, Greg Jensen. These are people that run the world's largest private hedge fund. Just incredible learning, but the same concept as the SEALs. How do you lean in and learn? And I was fortunate to have that opportunity. I've had a couple, other things that I've bounced around and done. Currently now part of an incredible leadership team at VMware, and just leading operations and transformation and thinking how to this company is $11 billion in top line and does all kinds of modern application, modern infrastructure, cutting edge security, et cetera. And all it is the same. 95% of high performing organizations are the same across them. And so how do you identify what that mojo, that 95% is? And I think that there are a couple things that come to mind. Number one, it is an ability to think differently. We talk, rightfully so, a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion right now in today's day and age. It's wonderful that we're finally recognizing the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. One part of that is also not just making sure you have the right people in the room, but do you have a culture that actually listens to people when you have time to? And so how do you have decision-making systems so that you get diverse inputs into a decision? And when you have as many disparate and diverse inputs into a decision, number one, you're building by definition a little bit of conflict in that system because you've got people who think A and other people that think B. And then you can then how do you make sure that best idea rises to the top? So that is something that SEALs get really good at. It's the process about operations that we talked about earlier. But creativity is great in the SEALs also, because whenever we think that we're out of ideas, there's always one more idea. And so to come in and infuse that that either the literal ideas, or more importantly, to infuse the mindset in an entire organization that you're never out of ideas, that you just got to get more creative. That's another little special sauce there. And then of course, just I think the good old fashioned work ethic, like SEALs work hard, and it can, I like to say we as humans on the planet are we're the average of the people we hang out with. And so in my life have tried to hang out with people who are smarter, faster, stronger. I become more of the same. And so at the same time, I try to pull people up in the areas where I might be just a little bit better. And then collectively, it all just works. So long answer to a very simple question. But I think, again, it's really, you don't have to be a SEAL to have these capabilities and mindsets, et cetera.
Yeah. Just one further thing about the kind of mojo and the mindset. I brought up this notion of grit. And for those of you who haven't read this book by the psychologist Angela Duckworth, it's an amazing book. It's one of my favorite books. I'm a full-time writer. I find that trying to make it in the kind of wild, wild west of the arts is, it's not similar to the SEALs in a lot of ways, but it does require an enormous amount of passion, persistence, and faith in yourself. And there's sort of like always a reason to give up when you're trying to make it. And this notion of grit is like fascinating to me. And I guess the specific question I want to ask to you is like, grit is absolutely indispensable in terms of whether you're going to make it as a SEAL. But my question to you is grit something that can be taught and instilled in people, or rather, is grit most useful as a tool in evaluation? In other words, like this person might not have the specific skill set in XYZ way, but I see that they have this quality of grit, and therefore I'm going to invest in them. See what I mean? It's like noticing it versus like trying to like put it in somebody.
Yeah, it's the nature versus nurture question.
Right.
And I think truthfully, there's a little bit of both, but the go back to that run the 2-mile timed run thing. When I look at 100 people who get told right in that moment that they have to run again, and I can judge their body language and where their eyes go. I can look at all these little cues and figure a lot about that person in that very moment. Now that's just one data point, one moment in time, but that's the grit point that you're talking about. And so I think that if you told me as a leader of an organization, if I had to pick the person who has the best raw intelligence or the best like grit and ability to kind of react in the moment, I take the best grit and reaction over the best raw intelligence any day of the week, because I think that obviously rather have both, but that if I had to take one or the other, that is a real factor in ultimately in what will drive success. I always want to emphasize though that like never enough is not about just like the go run harder, be harder, run through the brick wall. It's how do you think your way through things? How do you think about, you know, the one to many models and it's something like through stories and ways that aren't like just blow the whistle louder and run. You know, it's really the way through these problems in life is thinking through them and leaning on friends. It's a story very much about friendship as well.
Yeah, you talk a lot about the importance of relationships in the book, which is something I absolutely agree with. And just before I jump to audience questions, like just one anecdote about the kind of like the way to like take a SEAL mentality into your like daily suburban life. So I was coaching my son's basketball team this weekend, and it got a little chippy. My 7th grade son's team, and this guy on the other team actually like bear hugged my son from behind and kind of threw him. And like, I mean, my son was fine, but trust me, that like that sparked something in me, and I like started like walking on the court sort of towards the situation, and the ref got in my way and was just like, nope, we got this. And I'm glad he did, but it reminded me of like this point in your book, this great line you have, which is no matter what the crisis is, it always gets worse if you are not calm. And I mean, that was like exactly, you know, and like, thank God the ref got in my way because I wasn't being very SEAL-like, but I thought about it later and I'm just like, there really isn't ever a benefit to losing your cool, is there?
It's such a hard thing to do, but the statement that I've said for years and years is calm breeds calm, excitement breeds excitement. So when you're in that situation that's really hard, your brain can do one of two things. You can have thoughts and actions and emotions that are productive and that are counterproductive. So that spin cycle that you can go through is very counterproductive. Like when we discipline, there's a tendency for people to discipline in ways that make the discipliner feel good. That doesn't matter. Like it's not about me feeling good. Yep. Discipline is about an outcome. It's about one of two things: dissuading somebody from doing something again in the future. That's teaching and learning. That's what we need. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, if your child was being, you know, there was like imminent harm, I'm not saying that, you know, trying to come across like the total pacifist. I mean, I'm glad that if that went a different way, Mark, we wouldn't be here talking today, I'm sure. So I'm thankful you handled it the way you did. But no, it is so true. Like when you're getting shot at, my grandfather told me a story as he was a helicopter pilot flying in search and rescue. He was this, you know, very senior pilot at that point, and there was a young junior pilot they were getting shot at. It was that junior pilot's first time going, you know, Captain Hayes, we're getting shot at. And my grandfather told me, and who knows if this is true or not because the story's from him, but I would bet it's true. He turned to that young guy and he said, "Son, that's the enemy. That's their prerogative." And just in that tone of voice, that calming tone of voice, like you can't control where those bullets are going right in that moment. You can work on what you need, look forward, go live life through the windshield, not the rearview mirror. So what are the best actions you can take in a moment to most positively affect the outcome of what you're trying to do? And that ultimately is enabled by staying calm.
Yeah. Oh, totally applicable to like almost every day I'm alive. So great stuff. All right, we got about 5 minutes left. Let's punch through some of these questions from the audience. Okay. Are there female SEALs?
Not yet. The SEALs, just like every other service, has opened up the possibility, but the quick answer is no.
Okay, got it. All right, this is from Alex. How is SEAL training today different than it was 20 or 30 years ago?
Great question. Fundamentally, there's way more similar than there is different. But I think that the ways that we train have gotten smarter. You know, we think more about a body needing to last 20, 30 years. And we understand with science and health more of what the things that you shouldn't do. When I was in SEAL training, we did like people have seen dips where you do dip bars. Well, we had to like turn our hands backward and do dips, which puts way too much strain on the shoulder. And we're smart now. We do like the instructors can make the class hard enough in ways that don't physically harm the body over the long run. We need people to last.
Awesome. Okay. All right. This is from Jenna. Compared to becoming a SEAL, how was the process of getting your book published?
Jenna, it was more hard, if that's even English. You got me with such a great question. I can't even speak. I love the question. What I would say is I've always just been passionate about sharing. And I think that ultimately over time, when the right thing happens, and it's just a matter of how much work it's going to take. And it's been a very, very fun journey. It's been 3 years. It was 3 years ago I finished my proposal. Like
Wow.
as this audience more than any other audience knows,
Yep.
it's a slog and it's a long process.
Yeah. All right. One more question. This is going deep. This is the last audience question, but I am interested in your religious faith. As a practicing Catholic, I sometimes find it hard to square America's military might with Jesus's peaceful teachings to turn the other cheek. How do you square these two?
That's a great question. So let's go back to St. Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century and look at just war theory. There are elements of A, do you go to war? And then B, if you're in a war, then how do you act? Let's just talk quickly about the go to war. Look, the premise is, will conflict ultimately cause more good than harm? The answer to that has to be yes. Okay. And so, and then the expected outcome of that conflict has to be intended to be peaceful. And so ultimately going to people's motivation, the motivation has to be to create a better world. It is a tool. And it's also another part of that is war as a last resort, not a first resort. And so if you follow these principles around when we should be involved in a conflict, then I think that fundamentally it's very easy to square that circle.
Great answer. I appreciate you just delving right into that. All right, so that's going to wrap it for audience questions. I have one final question. Before that, I did want to give you an opportunity. I forgot to bring it up at the top of the call that you are doing something philanthropic with the proceeds of this book, and I just wanted to ask you about that.
Thanks. I'm donating all of my profits to a 501c3 I started. It's that very quietly pays off mortgages for Gold Star families. Like I said, I've buried way too many friends and teammates, and I've seen way too much suffering and loss. And at this point, what gives me energy and passion is trying to help some of those families, like we said before. So at this point in my life, I've helped with my own work and some great, very gracious generosity from a few others. We've paid off 5 houses so far, and there's no website, there's no fanfare. It's very there. I never ask the recipients to take the picture or write the endorsement so that I can get more donations. I know the Gold Star community really well. We're actually literally right now, there's tomorrow wiring money for a home for a woman who lost her husband in Afghanistan and then lost her business in the pandemic. Her husband has been gone for, I also don't want to give information that lets people kind of walk in on who that might be. So, but middle of the war in Afghanistan, and then she and her 4 children didn't have a permanent home. And so, we've just picked out a home for them, and they're going to be able to anchor in and kind of really rebuild the foundation of their life. So there are a lot of models for nonprofit work. Do you do, a weekend and help somebody? Do you go really broad and shallow, or do you go narrow and deep? I've picked the narrow and deep model. But I just want to emphasize that all of my profits are going to paying off these mortgages for Gold Star families who have sacrificed so much. And that's just a real important cause. I think that certainly for me, and I would hope for everybody in the nation, just like we all have our own great causes, but this is certainly one near and dear to my heart.
Wow. That is so cool, man. You are such a great ambassador for the SEALs. I mean, that is amazing work you're doing. And actually, I just got a question from the audience. What is the name of the nonprofit, and can people donate to it?
The name of the nonprofit is the 1162 Foundation.
Okay.
It's 1162 is the date that Kennedy started the SEALs. Okay. We do not have a public way to take money. We have no full-time employees. I personally cover the cost for all of the administrative expenses. Okay. If somebody's so we have not done the retail kind of like, it's mostly been, larger donations, and if I speak in public, I, sometimes get massively overpaid for it, and I donate that. And so, if you really someone feels passionate about helping, hit me on LinkedIn. If you search like Mike Hayes SEAL or Mike Hayes VMware, I'll pop up. but greatly appreciate the question. What I would say is direct your energy, please. I'd really appreciate help getting the book out there, because the book causes more awareness and more opportunities to speak. And I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but I just got asked a little while ago if I might pop onto MSNBC Live tonight. So that'd be an awesome opportunity with Ari Melber. And so I haven't checked my email in the last hour, but that was a couple hours ago. And so like helping in any way that we can get the word out and be speaking about this, that'd be really, really appreciated. I mean, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, the Indies, whatever, Books a Million, whatever people's platform are, that's the best thing that would be really, really helpful and meaningful.
Awesome. Well, hey man, Thoughtful Bro and Ari Melber on one day. I mean, that's a big day. All right, well, look, we're going to wrap here, but I have like a final question that I ask all of our authors who come on the show. And that is, just imagine that you have an ideal reader for this book, somebody who's getting everything that you're up to, who's just receiving the book in just the way that you had intended for it to be received. That person closes this book on the last page, and just describe for me like the feeling that they have, or like the boiled down to a phrase or even a word. What are they taking from this book?
Great question. A renewed passion to go help others. It's not more complicated than that.
Yeah.
I would say inspiration and insight. It's also insight, because I think I'm sorry, this is way more than one word now, but I think I've had some unique ways to think about things, and I tried to share that as well. And so maybe when I speak in public, it'll be, I'll say 30 different things, and 30 different people will latch on to 30 different things. And so I just hope that I've given a reader, their own 1 or 5 or 10 things that they can latch onto and think about, just like you did on the basketball court. That's what gives me the most pleasure, is hearing people kind of really recenter and refocus and rethink about their own lives and what they can contribute to their own families and organizations, and ultimately the planet.
Great stuff, Mike. What an amazing interview, man. I feel so inspired right now. Do you have a copy of the book? I know it's over your shoulder, but do you have a copy there you go, folks. So folks, just do yourself a favor, do a family member a favor, buy this book. Remember, all the proceeds are going to Gold Star families. You can't really do a better thing with your money, in my opinion, than buy Never Enough by Mike Hayes. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show, and congratulations on the book.
Hey, Mark, thank you so much for having me. And thanks so much for what your whole ecosystem does for bringing great messages out to the world, and what everybody listening, we're equally motivated. So a million thanks, not just from me, but for everybody who's listening, and I really greatly appreciate it, and wish absolutely the best for everybody.
Thank you, Mike. All right, folks, we'll be back next week on A Thoughtful Bro with Julie Carrick-Dalton, her buzzy new book about the environment, and it's going to be terrific. Thanks again to Mike Hayes, and we'll see you next week.